Are you familiar with this symbol? Okay, what is that?
I forget the name of it, but it's the symbol of power that's used to show that they have control of both the physical realm and the higher realms. That's used as a bit of it for the Catholic Church and other things for kingship and monarchies.
So you're showing the circumpunct, right, Durif, on your arm?
Amongst other things. So once we get into symbolism, and like the Triquatra is one, the others that you showed are other ones. The symbols, they all have multiple meanings. When it comes to the solar wheel that you have on the flag behind you there, it's very strange that you also see that in what they use for astrological symbols. We were talking about the sun. The sun's solar symbol would be that circumpunct. The earth is actually the solar wheel behind you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Uslaga Saga podcast. Today, we are going to be diving into the subject of ancient symbols. Maybe not so much symbolism that might show up, but we're going to be talking about symbols that we find interesting, compelling, worthy of our focus, and seem to tell a story and continue to have an influence from their early times on into now. Still manage to influence the minds, hearts, and souls of people who are practitioners within the pagan practice or any other type of non-denominational practice, just going over things that we find interesting in our ancient ancestors' artistic expression. So we want to start off maybe where we were discussing things with the Triquatra.
Yeah, it sounds like a good diving point.
Well, I've been studying the Celtic stuff recently, but I'm still not entirely familiar with it. I know that it's similar to the Volknut within the Norse mythology. But I'm sure, Nathaniel, you could probably elaborate a bit on what we're looking at here.
Take it away.
So I haven't studied this symbol and myself. However, I can already tell you by looking at it what there's, basic stuff for what is going on. There's obviously stuff with the Triskelion as well, not just the Volknut. And in fact, all three probably are very similar for what's going on. But if you look at the symbol itself, it's an amalgamation of three Vesica Pisces, right? So you have one that's this way, one that's this way, and one that's this way, and they're all interlapped together. So that already tells us a lot for what it is if you know anything about the Vesica Pisces. Then, of course, you also have it where it's inside of a circle that binds it all together, like a sigil, so to speak. And so the Vesica Pisces and the circle are both feminine aspects to begin with. So you already know where this is going to a certain extent for what's going on there. And what happens is that, it makes it so that way the Vesica Pisces represents portal. All right. But it's multiple different ways that this can be taken out, and why it's womanhood and why it's done that particular way is because it has to do with the genitalia and the opening there for what's going on for a woman in terms of her vagina is what it is as well. And that's a big part of it. But if you can see behind me here with the sacred geometry that I have back on my part here with it, it's also based upon sacred geometry that goes along with that side of things with it. And if you were to take the circle idea and just make it outward for what you put two circles together, the overlap that we see that we know is like a Venn diagram or whatever, that also forms the Vesica Pisces inside of that. So after you have two of them, that's when you get from a three-dimensional standpoint, this like football oblong shape thing, and it gives us light. That's what occurs from that as well. So you have the notion of light, because the Vesica Pisces with that portal, and then you have the feminine. This is all about the goddess tradition that's going on here in some way, shape, or form. And most likely the goddess of sovereignty for what's happening on that particular front. Again, I've never studied this directly yet. I've only seen what I know from other traditions that I'm pulling from when I'm talking about this particular symbol at this moment in time, okay? For anybody that's listening here for what's going on that. Now, we also know that in general, the circle and anything that's curved base is more on the feminine side of things. Masculine is more linear based for what's going on. And so, you can see that with the Volknut as an example. It seems to be the masculine version of the Triquatra for what's happening in terms of how it's playing out there. Now,
Do you think that they have any relation to each other?
but directly related to each other, because not only are they Indo-European aspects of things with it, but whenever you read the stories of the Volknut that are surrounding it, with would be some people would call it Hunger's heart or Yarta and
A stone
whatnot.
heart,
The
right?
stone heart that's there with it. It talks about it that way. If you go and look at it for whenever it's brought up in terms of any of the archaeological evidence and whatnot, it always shows up with initiation rites into the other realms. This is just a fact for what's going on with it. And so, of course, this also touches on the other thing that we were potentially going to be talking about, which has to do with the 9 realms again on that particular front, at least from the Nordic perspective for what's going on there. That's also what the Triskelion is about with it too. If you look at it, it's just the inner part of that. And, there's even the Manx saying for the Isle of Man, and no matter which way you throw it, it'll stand up, right? And so they thought it was a caltrap for what it was representing. But that's only because it's been Christianized for what it was in terms of the imagery. But if you go back to the original, it's much more of the same stuff with the Triquatra here, or even with the, with the original Triskelion for what's going on there, instead of what they have of their version of it that's now surviving on the Isle of Man there. And the point is that there's three wells inside of the Nordic tradition that one has to go to that make it so that way you have spiritual illumination and whatnot. One is in each of the realms they're in different realms for what it is. One, Odin gives his eye at the Mimir, just as an example for what's happening. You can also see this with the Celtic tradition, with the stories here with, Taliesin and whatnot, and you make it so that way he has a cauldron that he's in charge of, and he's helping out with for the goddess figure in that tradition. And eventually the cauldron is being prepared for somebody else, but some of the droplets boil over onto the cauldron, out of the cauldron onto his thumb, and he makes it so that way those 3 droplets that are there on his thumb make it so it goes there with it. So if you look at that symbol also probably contains the idea of those droplets or wells that are being there, because in the Indo-European tradition, no matter which one you look at, water represents the crossing of one realm to the next.
Before we get off of what you were talking about, there's a part of that. So we've talked about it in a few other things, but from what I've been learning about in the Celtic and Druidic practice, it's shown that springs as well as trees actually bring energy from the lower realms up into the higher, or to the Midgard that we would be within, right? And then so also the higher realms are like the solar realms that we then create our own constructions or do our own practices as receivers or transplacers of that energy. But I just wanted to ask, because with the Volknut, that one is almost entirely representative or shown in carvings having to do with some type of ritual sacrifice or lower realm type of interaction that the people are having. So from what I've seen, it's usually beneath or underneath in some capacity. I was looking at a few things here. It's usually underneath the horse, or in some other carvings I've seen it. Yeah, it's usually beneath or something like that. But in the Druidical practice, they will actually have that cauldron that you're speaking about when they're building an altar. It's important to have that, because it is this idea that you're receiving knowledge from within that, from the depth. And I think we talked about it before, how in like the Judeo culture, the underneath the water is like Satan's realm or something like that, right? So it's almost like the Christian idea has made that lower realm knowledge perverted in some way, or told to be evil knowledge, right? Like maybe I'm disjointed in what I'm trying to say here, but it seems like in both Nordic and Celtic cultures, they see, lower realms beneath the water as sources of knowledge and wisdom and and those sorts of things. And yeah, I was just noticing that, thinking that was an interesting thing that you brought up right there. I'm just wondering if that's a similar perspective that you have.
The cauldron inside of the Nordic tradition is the maiden with the mead, and that figure and whatnot that goes along with that, with a drinking horn that's used instead on that particular front with it. And so what also is part of that same story with Taliesin and that kind of thing is that the rest of the cauldron is poisonous, and if you drink from it, you will die. You see this same dichotomy show up over and over and over and over again in all these stories for what it is. It's not just even, say, that of the Celtic peoples and the Nordic peoples. You can see this with the Orphic tradition as well. And the Orphic tradition, they have this cauldron that is there, this well that's there sometimes too, that looks like it's good for you, but it's not. If you are to drink from it, you will lose all your memories of what you have found in the other world, and you can't bring it back for what it is. And it can cause death and insanity on that side of things too. And it's always on the left-hand side of the path for what it is inside of these traditions that are going on with it. Whereas on the right-hand side, there's another one that's harder to find and is there. And if you drink from it, then you can gain spiritual illumination. And you see the same thing happening here with it and all the stories that are going on in some capacity or another, as far away as Japan, even for what's happening in other parts of the world that are in North America and South America too, for what's going on. It's not unique even to the Indo-European tradition, so to speak, or the Proto-Indo-European is the point. You definitely see it inside of ancient Sumerian tradition and Egyptian tradition as well, which did not have anything to do with this side of things either for what's going on that particular front. But we're getting a little off topic now.
So you're saying on the left and right side?
Yes, the left side on the Orphic tradition and in many other traditions. I'm just using the Orphic one, which is a Greek mystery school tradition, to show that it's other Indo-European, and it's not just that of the Nordic and Celtic stuff with it, that there's a cauldron or well or something like that, depending upon the story and tradition that's there with it, that if you drink from that, it'll lead you to, it won't lead you to elimination. It'll lead you to forgetting what you see in the underworld. It can lead to death and insanity in other cases for what's going on. And so if you take the two chasms between finding spiritual illumination and enlightenment by going to the underworld, which is usually a goddess figure that's in charge of it in some form or another that's there, which brings us back to all this goddess symbology that's in there that we were talking about from the beginning and whatnot. You see in Snorri Sturluson's version of it that she's down the middle this way, one half being a fair maiden, the other side being death with it. But in the oldest version, more likely than not, it was the front that was beautiful and the back that was hideous. And you make it so that way that's the case for that on that front with it. So they got the half and half part right with Snorri. It's just that he seems to have either mixed it up himself, or that somehow after thousands upon thousands of years, it just changed to this being this side and that side instead of the front and the back portions with this. You see this with the Japanese myth as well for what's going on that particular front for it too, for when they have to go after her, the main two twin brother and sister creator gods of Japan. And so why I'm bringing this up though is because when you go into these realms, you go into these particular other areas of existence and whatnot, what happens then is if you go to these higher levels where you're going for like this illumination, you can be killed or go insane. That's what it's letting you know. If you're not properly prepared to deal with it, then that is the consequences of going down the wrong path and choosing the wrong things with it. And you have to choose right and correctly.
Well, I want to get into you with this right here. Have you heard of the 3 rays of light?
Yes.
Okay, so like in the Druidic practice, they have the 3 rays of light, which on one side representing knowledge, the other side representing power. The extremes of the self, essentially having ultimate knowledge or full knowledge, and having simply power, right? And these are the extremes that you can occupy in almost any situation, right? You can forcefully do something or you can tactfully do something, but operating simply off one of these things is not going to lead to that's binary thinking. That's what they would refer to it as binary thought.
Yeah, this or that.
Yeah,
right.
This or that, right? And that leads to chaos, right? And that the actual middle one is actually peace, or like harmony between the two. So the middle ray of light is the path of actual succession or progress, which is how they tried to cultivate their thought, which is based off of observing what was knowledgeable, what is powerful, and then what is the harmony between the two. So having the third
But that's
option.
probably why there's the 3 in there for what it is. And remember, as I said, in terms of the sacred geometry aspect and understanding of it, that football 3-dimensional shape, which is 2-dimensional, would be the Vesica Pisces, gives us the 3 rays of light that are built there and the 3 portals that are that way for what's going on in order to find that particular balance for what's happening on that particular front.
Have we lost?
No, I'm just sitting here with my mind, like so many things are going through my head. Like, I don't even get on my face. So the second Nathaniel was talking about then the split between the two, and I'm like, wait, anything. And then you're like, no, it's actually the front and the back. And I'm like, wait, you just blow my mind the whole time. No, we're good. I mean, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm actually waiting to throw some mind-blowing in there too in just a second, but
Yeah.
it gets more into the realms and other symbols.
I'll finish off with this part here and then we can move on to something else with it. But if you look at the circle again, which is what it is, that's supposed to be like the sigil around it. If you look at all the ancient traditions, they have the concept of the one, out of the one comes the many, and that kind of thing with it. And so you have the birthing of the universe, which feminine concept for the birth of it, and that kind of thing for what's going on. And so then you have the portals that come out of that particular idea that's there. And so 1 begot 2, 2 begot 3 type of notion for what's happening. So you have that. You also have that in a lot of the ancient mystery school traditions that are going on there, which there seems to be some remnants of in the Temple of Uppsala, in terms of the notion as well, to where you would have 3 different degrees, which of course is part of the Druidic aspect of it as well, Ovate, Bard, and then the actual Druid. A part of it that happens there is that there would be 3 days of initiation rites per each one for it. 3 + 3 + 3 equals 9 for what it is. And you have the 9 days that was there for the temple of the goddess is what it is. Because it's not the goddesses or the female entities. It's the singular goddess that's there for the temple of Uppsala. That's there on that particular front. And this also can be proven that it's an Indo-European idea by making it so that way you have the great Dhisana, as it's known inside of the Vedic tradition, the gods and goddesses that all manifest and emanate from her. And Dhisana and Disir or Disting are direct cognates with one another in terms of the literal meanings of it and etymological roots for what's going on. And then one final thing is that if you read the Poetic Edda, it explicitly, if you read it very, very carefully for what it is, it explicitly states that the person and the opening lines that Odin is speaking to, that is the vulva that's there with it, that this is the 10th iteration, because there have been 9 other ones, is what she says of it. This is the 10th iteration of the universe being from there. And, it's trying to show that she is the conceiver of it. And that's what we all come from and come from that particular thing with it, which ties back into all 3 symbols that we've been touching upon on that, because they all have the 9 realms idea. That's part of that goes into it. And to get into that notion again, to show that this is an Indo-European concept, you also have in the Vedic traditions where there have been 9 savior gods or, savior figures that come down each time that there has been an iteration for things in terms of the consciousness that's going on for that. You can see that, with Krishna as an example, and then Rama as another for what's going on there, just to name 2 quick iterations that have happened on that particular front. So this is not just a Nordic thing, as the point. It's a much older tradition that goes back to...
It goes all the way back to the Eurasian stuff
thousands of years.
and the blending of the cultures. Wait, so Drift, what were you about to...
Sorry, I'm on mute a lot. The kids are going wild out in the other room. So what I was kind of thinking and waiting for a shot on that is when it comes to symbolism and the 369, we all know those are some things that are deep rooted in whether it's mysticism or just ancient knowledge or geometry and those sort of things. When you look at the, what is it, Triquetra? Okay, I always called it something completely different. That's why when she originally said it, I was like, oh, no, I'm probably wrong. But I was putting some sort of extra flair on it. So when you look at each of the, I guess, half moon shapes, you can call it, because you got the two, then you've got the third underneath that give it that motherly zone, we'll say, in the middle. And each of those half moons has 3 different angles on it. So you have 1, 2, and then the third that comes back to. So there's 2 bends. Just using what I'm looking at as the right side, you've got the 2 that enter the center of the circle, and then of the curvature. So each of them had that same sort of thing. So there's 3, 6, and 9 when going into that. That should also correlate quite a bit with the 9 realms and that center of a oneness, we could say. And the symbol I was actually mostly thinking of, because all 3 of those images you see now have that triple, right? They all have that 3 points, 3, 6, 9, the 3 swirls, 1, 2, and 3 going outwards of each of them, 3, 6, 9, and then the 3 curvatures on each of the 3 points, 3, 6, 9. When it goes into Woden hanging from the tree of life, and we know it as Yggdrasil. When you think of the 9 nights, I think of that as 9 moons. And when you think of the tree of life, I think of that more as the placenta. So for myself, it would be more of him hanging on the placenta, obviously inverted until the time of birth, that singular moment, and life being the 3 trimesters. Therefore, the first 3, the second 3, and the third 3, each of those having their own curvature, their own spiral, or their own triangular pattern when looking at the figures we just seen before us. So taking the 3 trimesters of a woman's pregnancy and using that as the first 3 months. Exactly. So now we have a picture of what a woman's placenta looks like directly after birth, and that a child would be hanging from the stalk, I guess you'd say, or we would be the root, or inverted the opposite way. But in a lot of different cultures, they keep that as a very spiritual thing, because that's once in a lifetime, without any doubt.
That's really crazy, because I spoke to my midwife about the placenta. If I need to take this down, let me know. But I wanted to reference it because, yes, this was huge in ancient Nordic practice, and specifically those who follow the path of, perhaps the 3 Norns, right? There's another set of 3 right there, right? And what they would do is they would actually look within the placenta. As you can see here, there's darker lines within this. You can probably see stress marks along certain areas, or tears or clots, things like that. And this was probably the idea of where the tree of life came from, even though it's present in both the Norse, Celtic, and a few other traditions as well. But I told my midwife about this. I was like, yeah, it's actually the tree of life from like Celtic and Nordic things. So she had one hanging on her wall. She was like, oh my God, I never even thought of that. It is the placenta. And it definitely blew her mind a little bit. There's actually something Thor brought up one time too, but I think that's incredible that you just made that connection. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when getting into, say, the 3 trimesters, each of those 3 having of 3. And when you look at the same 3 symbols before us, each of those having their own 3, the 3, 6, and 9, which all things are created in the geometry of design. Wait, is that God? I don't know. But either way, when taking into consideration those things and then hanging from said tree, there's so many different things that can come from that.
Tesla.
Yeah, it's also where the notion of like the 40 days come from, and other traditions. It equals to 40 weeks of pregnancy.
It's something that I actually found, I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but a little bit strange. Chimpanzees are very close to humans as far as biology goes. I think like 98% close to us when it comes to DNA, and they don't have 40 days of, I guess, gestation. They are typically pregnant for 8 months, and that's only 1 moon behind us. The possibility of that 2% genealogical, I guess, deviation. So when you take a look at a lunar cycle being 28 days, and then it would be literally 1 week behind it. There are 280 days, I think it is, for us, as far as a woman's typical 40 weeks goes for pregnancy. And they are exactly 28 days, maybe 28.13 or something like that when it comes to their pregnancy.
Okay, I need to start looking into the cycles of chimpanzee mating.
Yeah,
so that
don't
way I
worry
can
about
understand.
why I know so much about pregnant chimps. I'm just saying, I've been around the world.
No, I just need to. That's interesting. Do they follow a? Go ahead.
Needs to be a clip for this episode.
Right? Don't worry about Don't worry about why I'm knowledgeable on chimp pregnancies. Just know that I spent some time in Africa.
I was gonna say it'd be interesting to see the similarity of like how they follow moon cycles when it comes to reproduction. How do they follow a similar idea? Okay, we're becoming the Joe Rogan podcast now. All right.
Like I said, that's a little bit off topic, but a strange similarity when taking a look at, say, our 9 realms using the idea of gestation period for childbirth. Who knows? Chimps are typically in their stone age, we'll say. They're learning how to use tools. Maybe they'll have 8 realms. Who knows?
That could be a possibility. Yeah, that was really great though. That was pretty incredible.
Like I said, that's a little bit of a little nugget of what the. So
I've learned when studying this stuff that the mythological landscape, in terms of even folklore for that matter, or at least if it's good folklore, meaning that it keeps a lot of the original material inside of it in some capacity or another, that it has not one or even 2 layers of meaning, that it has multiple layers of meaning, and it was there in order to make it to see where someone who was potentially going to be initiated into these mysteries or whatever, where their consciousness was at, where it needed to be directed towards, where it didn't need to be directed towards, all these other things that are going on there. That's why people spoke symbolically. So that way, no matter what, there could be something that's taken away from the stories. And maybe they took away something that was never intended originally from the stories, but they still learned a lesson because they could see things that other people didn't see inside of it that fit their own personal experience and that kind of thing. And that's kind of the point for some of these things that's going on with it. So just because, say, Drift has a different interpretation of certain things that I brought up here with it, even though I would say that there's nothing that contradicts what I said, and there's nothing that contradicts what Drift said about this in any way, shape, or form. I would say they're direct parallels to one another, and that it's the as above, so below principle, as within, so without, meaning that what mirrors the physical world will also mirror the spiritual world and vice versa, the other world, whatever term you want to put on it. And it's exactly the same thing for what's happening. It's just the process that people can understand. Is the physical world better because we see it and we live in it for what's happening, and that both sides that are brought up, or even other things that are not even talked about between him and I, are accurate when it comes to some of this symbolic stuff with it, as long as it's put in its proper historical context.
Tim, well, let's see. Crow, do you
Yeah.
have a symbol? Go ahead, Athena. Yeah.
I just want to interrupt really quick. So you just kind of blew my mind with all of that, actually. I had to
Did you do the
think
math?
about that. Well, yeah, as you were doing it, like I have to think, I'm not a fast thinker sometimes. And so I just had to sit and think about that. I was like, holy crap, I can't believe like that was such a great epiphany, or however you got that information. It was just like, whoa, like my
Like I said,
revelation. Yeah.
I spent some time in Kenya, and I've been around a few pregnant chimps in my life. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding on that last part.
I think we were talking about that your philosophy on the 9 realms was
Right.
so incredible.
Mhm.
Yeah, like I've heard the placenta being related to the tree of life. That's in a lot of different cultures all over the place. Like that's, again, like I said, I've heard it a lot, but that in depth of how you spread it, that I've yet to hear. That was definitely very good. So I think I can be a nice little middle ground for that whole thing. So starting with the symbol, I can't say it. I've never been able to say it.
Triquatra.
Yeah. So
Wait,
I do have it tattooed on me. But the reason I had it tattooed on me, this tattoo is, God, I think I got it when I was 20. I was 19 or 20, and I'm 38 now. So I got it a long while ago. So I was still very new into the whole spiritual practice. But that was the moment when I got this tattooed on me. Just very awkward, by the way, having our friend tattoo this on me because he had to like lean on my chest. And like the tattoo artist and Ken have known each other since they were like little kids in elementary school. So like, we're just sitting with each other like, is this not awkward?
Never would have thought we'd be here.
No, never would have thought. If we went to high school together, like all this stuff, never thought we'd be here at this moment. Anyway, so I got that. And I also got it. It's the Triquetra with all this interwoven knot work and all that stuff on it. Because at that time I had that epiphany moment. I had that the connection to that upper, middle, and lower worlds. and how it's a constant reflection of that you're in and out of them at all given times. That, your soul learns life lessons throughout your journey, and that journey is through all the intertwining of the different worlds. So to me, it wasn't like the textbook necessarily definition of the symbol itself. It was the loop constantly going around and around, going lower, upper, middle, lower, like all the way around. And the knot work in the middle represented to me my journey in between all of that. Because technically I live in the middle world, but through astral travel, wherever you want to call it, you visit and have experiences in the others. So that was a symbol that very much like Athena. And at that point, I don't know why I was necessarily drawn to it at the time. It fit what I was feeling. I was like, that's it. Like I was talking with the tattoo artist and stuff too. I'm talking with Jay and we're just like, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, whatever. And that's what felt right at that time. And then hearing as time has gone on, and then now that even deeper knowledge of it that Nathaniel was able to put together just by looking at it, not studying it at all, like further kind of reinforces that I'm really glad it's on me.
All three symbols that are there that have to do with the 9 realms that we talked about. Life, death, rebirth.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's that whole constant cycle. And that's what it was. It was about that cyclical thing. Now I know, like all these years later, my practice is shamanic and nature-based and cyclical, cycles, nature, all that stuff. It makes so much more sense. It was a happy thing to happen to work out. Like Ryan, which I'm sure Rodas, he's going to talk about is the sun cross. But I know you can edit that. Like Rodas would talk about here about the sun cross. I do have that. I can't show this tattoo up on my forearm that well, but it's over here on here. It's part of my symbolism. I like the sun cross. Originally it's for the shamanic reasons. It's the 4 directions. It's the animal archetypes that go with it. It's the blending of people. It's of the upper, middle, and lower worlds, which still happen on, even though it's then cyclical cycles all the way around it, still has those same textbook definitions. Finding out later when I really got into the Norse practices is when I actually found out about the whole sun part of it too, and the illumination and the life force given of it and everything. And I'm like, so yeah, my connection with symbols has always been, I was drawn to it, not necessarily knew why. And it was like symbols that like, it's just what it felt meant to me. That might be the completely wrong way of going about it, but I was brave enough to get all these things tattooed on me when it felt right. But, I have an unconventional way of going about symbols. I'm more like in the practice of it first. And then like somebody's like, oh, there's a symbol that represents all this. I'm like, what? Really? That's it. That's what I need to do. So that's my take on symbols. It might be unconventional and I'd be reckless, but that's the way I live my life. You only live once, right? I jump in and I think about the consequences later.
Yeah, I was gonna say gosh, it's kind of a similar thing because I was very like not into tattoos because I was like, I'm gonna be that. I don't want to be like everybody else who has a sleeve and just gets all these tattoos that have no actual meaning. And I was just like, if I ever want to get a tattoo, it's gonna jump off the page at me, and I'm gonna know it's the right thing. And when I was getting into the Norse study and all that stuff, the one thing, and like I said at the beginning of this whole podcast and everything like that, is that at the very heart of it all, I consider myself a sun worshiper. And for practical reasons, right? It is like the most prevalent form of godliness that we can experience. It does manifest everything on this planet. But when I learned about the Hálrisninga or the petroglyphs or the tandem rock carvings or whatever, I was on my way to Denmark, we had a trip planned to go to Denmark, and I scheduled an appointment at Kai's studio, and I picked all the best ones that I could find that represented the practice of the early Bronze Age sun worship and how they would actually practice this and what they believed in. We've got the one of the longest ships ever, right? And then we came up with the idea for a moon right there to represent the duality of the sun right there, and that's the Solhesten, right? And then we have show it, the ritualer right there, and that's the ritual dancer, right, that they would have during that time. And the thing was is that it spoke to me, and I said, because I've always been so involved in like sun worship before I was even spiritual, right? I always thought it was so amazing. I was in love with the idea of the Egyptian idea of sun worship with, I think it was Ra, right? And that was in my very adolescent days. And then moving into Mithraism with the Sol Invictus, which I'm sure Nathaniel could really elaborate on, which is really what got me into it, right? And I was like, holy shit, the sun I'll drop my idea of what the sun actually is in just a minute. But then you go into the Bronze Age, right? And there's a reason I love the Bronze Age of Nordic history or the Germanic history, because it is such a pure religion. I feel like not even a religion, but it's purely animistic in the sense that they worship the sun and what the sun then creates, right? They have like a reverence for this type of thing, and it's very to the point. But then as I keep getting further and further into this, I'm drawn to Druidical practice, and come to find out that Druidical practice is very focused, almost entirely focused on a sun worship or sun reverence. I'm like, okay, so it's just the sun, right? Like it has to be the sun. And this is what I believe. All right. I think Hollywood does this thing where they will show you, this is where it gets crazy. This is where it all falls apart. Whole podcast falls apart. I start talking. But Hollywood does this thing where they will show you the truth, right? They'll show you the truth in there, and then whatever occult practice they do, they're able to then, gain power from it because they've been honest and have gotten acceptance for it. It's like this exchange of like energy or whatever. But there's a show called Raised by Wolves, which is basically an idea of an alternate history where the religious practices of the individuals, they were able to read into their texts to understand through the symbolism of numbers and geometric ideologies or whatever, was able to give them like advanced technology. But then what it really ends up being, and what my philosophy is, having watched that and done all this research, the sun is the portal to other realms. Because what does the sun collapse into? It collapses into a black hole that goes into a space that we have no understanding of, right? Sorry, I had to drop that, and I didn't know if Nathaniel was able
No,
to
I
add
was
anything
thinking.
to it.
I was
Now,
thinking, like, wait a minute.
The sun is like this. The energy comes out of the sun because of the way that it's combusting at all times, and it is essentially an active portal that is sending out this energy from other realms and other spaces. And then as it collapses, or we're able to make it collapse or find a collapsed sun somewhere, that actually operates as a portal that can take us into other dimensions.
So
And that's
NASA, sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's way, crazy, but
NASA has come out with stuff that they are not, say it's public, but you have to go looking for it. All right. It's not something that's just like talked about on the news or whatever the deal is. The idea that light travels from the sun to here is bullshit. Doesn't travel. What they have determined is that approximately every 8 minutes, which is why they thought that it would travel and that kind of long and how long it did from it, there's a portal that opens up and it goes from there to here instantaneously. That is what NASA has discovered in terms of its own understanding of how light is transmitted from the sun to the earth. There's some sort of portal thing in between that makes it so that way it opens up every minute, every 8 minutes approximately. And that's when we get the light energy that comes through with it. So it vindicates everything that you said exactly about it, 100%.
So what's interesting is, so the Pacos, so they're the descendants of the Incas. They believe that the last official Inca disappeared into a portal through the sun. Because they worship the sun. They think that they disappeared through a portal. They had to journey into the jungle to find that place to get to the sun, so they can go to those other worlds, and they're waiting for them to kind of come back. And they're going to come back through the sun. And you have many religious practices where Savior comes from the fucking sky, right? From the sun.
I mean, if you think about it, the Jesus is a solar god too. So I mean, what is it? The Pacos could have already foretold that.
Jesus, Horus, Maitreya,
There are at least
here.
there's at least 44 of these types of saviors that I'm aware of. And there are certain scholars that have put it at 70 some odd that I've seen. This is nothing that's new. The notion that the greatest story ever told is unique to Christianity somehow is ludicrous when it comes to that particular idea for what it is. There's so many different ones with it. I mean, right here, and this one's not 100% accurate, and there's some faults with it, but in general, it does a good idea with it. I mean, it just even talks about it right here in this book, for what's going on it. And this book is, pretty old and for its work and whatnot. And there's 16 of them here that's going on. I mean, there's a reason why they didn't, like, Snorri wasn't allowed to bring up Odin in terms of him being on the tree of life, hanging from it with the spear that gets, that he gets, wounded by and all that other stuff with it. And he ends up being a kind of initiatory savior type figure for what's going on that particular front with it, because it's too close to the truth of what was going on also with this story of the person that we know in the Western world as Jesus Christ, because that's not even his real name. That's why I say that. So
we got to invest money into like simulation software that can take all 70 of these solar deities, and then we put them in like a combat arena, and then whichever one comes out to be the winner, that's who we worship.
It's the
You're gonna
survival of the fittest. Figure it out.
If you're going to use AI, I mean, you could probably take all of those solar deities, put them into the arena that you say, and one by one kick them out until basically you had a Jesus figure anyways. That's what Romans did. I mean, if you kill all who oppose and you burn their book and only give them one book, eventually they'll come around.
that's
Oh,
why it's
see,
called Catholicism. It means universal, but it was universal for the Roman Empire.
And if it was
So everything it
truly
would come in contact with and touched. Yeah.
right, and if it was truly universal, there wouldn't be uncontacted tribes that are definitely against
Yeah,
that
it's
shit
just-
right now.
Universal for what Rome knew during that time period. That's why you
Right.
got stuff from, Horus and, the Egyptian mystery traditions and whatnot. You've got Mithricism in there, Sol Invictus. You've got stuff that's from Baal that's in there, or Bel, if you want to go with that particular version of it. And that, I mean, it's just all over.
You're saying Bel, like the Ohm that you showed earlier?
Uh-huh.
Is that in reference to Baal or Baal?
Yes.
And Baal is a solar deity?
In a sense, yes.
I thought he was like a fire deity,
Well, what is a fire deity but a lower version of the sun?
an imitation of the light,
Exactly.
a destructive version of the light.
It could also be a good one for what's going on. It depends on who's telling the story and why they're telling the
How
story.
cold it is.
So you also have so many different things that go into that. It's kind of ridiculous for what it is. I mean, there's a ancient Celtic god or whatever, even previously before the Celtic god and whatnot. Literally, if you were to read its story, you thought it would be Jesus Christ's story if you didn't know that it was from some other source, because of how much of it is the same. It's literally, I have to look it up how it's spelled and whatnot, but it's literally the same idea. It's all like he's a carpenter / architect for what's going on with it, that's happening there. He ends up getting crucified. Like literally, if you read the entire story, it's exactly the same story. That's the problem, is that it's a symbolic story of the sun overcoming death on the Southern Cross. And what it is, it's an astro-theological story with a solar hero going into the underworld that we know of, where it can't be seen underneath the horizon, and then coming back up for what it is. That doesn't mean that these particular people didn't exist, like Jesus Christ doesn't exist. He did. You can find him in the historical records for what's going on there. It's just the church doesn't want you to know where it is, because that also destroys their entire narrative about who he really was and what he really did, because it also puts it in a different era from what they claim. It's not the 30s, more likely. It's most likely the 60s, which gets into the destruction of the Jewish temple and all this other stuff. But that's for another time period to talk about that for what's going on here. And so the idea is the solar consciousness that comes into being with it is also the inspiration for a lot of these mystery school traditions, in order to make it so that way it literally contains the hero's journey inside of it that Joseph Campbell, discovered, and making it so that way you would go in and go through the initiation process, which takes us back to the 9 realms, which takes us back to the portals that we were talking about before, which takes us back to how we started this episode in terms of the symbol that we did with it. And you have to go into the belly of the earth, the mother goddess, and womb to tomb idea, death, birth, and re-death, all that cycle stuff. So, it's just the same shit over and over again. Every culture had its version of it.
Nathaniel, I just want to ask you really quick. Are you familiar with this symbol?
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
I forget the name of it, but it's the symbol of power that's used to show that they have control of both the physical realm and the higher realms. That's used of it for the Catholic Church and other things for kingship and monarchies.
So you were showing the circumpunct, right, Drif, on your arm?
Amongst other things. So once we get into symbolism, and like the Triquatra is one, the others that you showed are other ones. The symbols, they all have multiple meanings. When you come to the solar wheel that you have on the flag behind you there, it's very strange that you also see that in what they use for astrological symbols. We were talking about the sun. The sun's solar symbol would be that circumpunct. The Earth
Yes.
is actually the solar wheel behind you. So you could say the two were reversed just for this process. You could also say that maybe we have it wrong and it's not necessarily a solar worship, but more of earth-based religion. So I mean, there's many different ways. When you say take the Bible as the text that we all kind of know of, they talk about the four corners of the world and things being held up in the firmament and all these other pretty crazy things. But if you look at the wheel behind you, there are four corners there. And if you take a look at the north, south, east, and west that are on it, then you have the cross in a circular pattern. There's that closed circuit about the life, death, rebirth cycle. When it's coming from a pagan symbol, it would make a lot of sense for them to say invert or reverse certain things so it's no longer good, it's now bad. That's one of the ones they couldn't necessarily do away with because, as the Romans did when they conquer and all these type of things, they had to adapt and slowly kick out so many things. That became such a symbol that, people would die for it, die on it, those type of things. But when you showed that other picture, there is the one that is between Earth and Mercury, and that would be Venus. So that would be the female symbol. All of those have things. And when you get into things like alchemy, then you have not the circumpunct, but you have the diamond with the dot in the middle of it. And all kinds of different crazy things stem from there.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll show that again in a second. But with this right here, a lot of people refer to it as a solar wheel, but it could be more of just the solar cross, right? I mean, this could represent the four seasons, but in the Celtic Golden Dawn literature, this symbol, the two symbols separated, like the cross and the circle, right? Representing like the four elements or four elemental powers, right? And then you have the circle representing the spirit or the essence of the person, the completion of a person, right? The self. And then you could see that it could be within, right? Or it could be the overcoming, right? Or the harm, like it could be this matter of operating, as they would describe it, as like the four elements being like an extension of the spirit in some way, in some capacity. But anyways, I was curious if you had thought about that because I was also on this right here. I think the thing of this is what you were talking about before, right?
Yes.
And we can see what that is and what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
We have an idea, right?
Worth.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like this type of thought is among all cultures, and this geometry is universal among all cultures, and they all seem to represent very similar ideas and thoughts. And like, sure, maybe that might be obvious to us here, but for some people, it's mind blowing stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, some people can't even, for whatever reason, it just irks me. And then these stupid professors that I talk to sometimes about stuff, so I'm getting like point where I don't even talk to. Well, at least I don't want to talk to this guy for sure. Like I was talking to him about Euler for what was going on, just to show they can't even think laterally. Like they're so disconnected from everything. And one of the potential names for Euler in terms of the original etymological roots for it is the woolly one. Okay, Euler obviously has to do with certain parts of winter and other things that are that way with it. And he could not make the intuitive leap that wool is associated with winter and that we still wear wool to keep warm during winter today. That is insane. I mean, you had people that were scholars that said Mjolnir being a hammer that belonged to Thor and the necklaces that were made during the Viking Age weren't a thing. And that wasn't real. That was all just speculative nonsense until one of them said, this is a hammer on it. I mean, that's how left brain prison locked some of these people are, that make it so that way they have to just be like, oh no, if it doesn't definitively say this and connect every step of the way through every single link there, what you're saying cannot be possible.
That's why. Yeah,
They
go ahead,
are.
Drift.
No, I had nothing to say.
I was going to say, well, that's the thing. You have academics who are not spiritual. Some are, right? Like you're one of them, right? You're an academic who's spiritual in a way.
Yes.
But then they're not the type of people who are going out, because the thing is that if you're talking about leaps and the ability to connect things, wool is also significant for hunting because it also conceals scent. It doesn't maintain scent. So
Right.
we,
That's
it,
another good point.
Uller was
the most obvious thing that even he could probably connect with.
that's the thing. Uller is represented with the winter hunt, or hunting on the Nordic skis and being an archer and that sort of concept, right?
That and many other things. There's even seems to be remnants of him potentially being some sort of solar sky deity and that kind of stuff. Remnants of that.
Well, everyone's a sky deity now, all right?
But I
And
don't
or
think
did it.
that's the case for it. I just know that to ignore that potentiality is foolish or whatnot. The only reason why I point to that is because it might be on that particular front that Uller is just another name for Tyr, another aspect of that same god for what's going on. If that's the case for it, then fine. I don't have a problem with that in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that there was a master thesis that someone did on that, was compiling all this different data about it, and some of the stuff in there did point to the possibility of that being the case.
Well, there are references of Tyr being the celestial deity or the sky father, right? The sky deity, because he actually he was represented by carrying the sun in one hand and the moon in the other hand. And he determined the fate of seasons by how he moved them around the sky, right? That was like one of the concepts they had by him. So Uller could have been like a lunar concept of him because he was strongly tied mostly to the solar aspect. But Uller could have been the lunar aspect of him in some way.
So my runic tarot deck, they have Uller on it as the hanged man with the skis and the wool and the arrows and what's around his head. I wish it would focus on camera so you guys.
It's the sun.
Yeah.
That's not a halo? I'm just kidding. Halos are the sun anyways. It's just the sun. But yeah,
But
you think
it has
Tyr
the
or
reference
Uller.
like it's shining, like up
Yes.
in the mountains, but he's upside down and free flowing. And usually the hangman is always depicted as like chains, like his hands are always, he's restricted in that. But like this is a choice for that, and it's it just I don't know. You guys, you're talking about that. I'm like, wait, somebody come in with a tarot card,
Brilliant
a
addition.
visual representation.
Well, okay, so we want to talk about, because we're all about natural law, right? And maybe we can close it off at a point. But have you guys ever been walking by a lake or by a body of water on a sunny day, and then you actually look down into the water, and the way that the light works typically always creates a halo behind your head? Have you guys ever noticed that? If the sun is at one of its highest points in the sky, and you go by a body of water, the shadow that's within the water or the reflection of you that's in the water will have the halo coming out from behind.
Yeah, you see it at the bottom. Yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
yeah.
I was gonna say, what happens is basically like, say, if you step in the water or something like that, you stir up the sediment that's there on the bottom. Some of it is like chrysalis, some of it's that false gold, some of it's all these different things. And when the sun projects your shadow, I guess, onto it, behind you, you'll have that little refraction from those particles that are in there, and it gives you that awe of a glow around your head. Yeah, most definitely.
I do want to say one thing, so I'm derailing the topic just a little bit, but I do want to kind of go back to, I need to be a responsible adult. And as I'm saying, how I recklessly have gotten symbols tattooed on me because of my personal meaning to them, my personal connection to them. Yes, every bit of my arm tattoo it's my entire shamanic journey. Even its placement is specific, and it's specific for Tyr. So yes, I pull symbols, I have runes on them. Things are going to mean different things to different people. I have dragons, I have crows, like animals are actually my biggest symbols, things I'm connected with. But am I saying for everybody to be reckless out there and not research a symbol and just get it tattooed on their body? No, because there are some horrible things you can get tattooed in their body. So like I said, I want to be the responsible adult and not have people that are listening to me right now be like, oh, well, she just does whatever she wants because you only live once. And then somebody gets some bullshit or some reckless thing tattooed on them, and then they face hardship because of it. So yes, like do your research. I didn't go into it completely blindly, but I was trying to make the point in that symbolism is very personal. It's very, very personal. And I have no problems if somebody comes over and asks me what's on my arm, because I have Tiwaz on my arm. Tiwaz is not always necessarily associated with a positive thing with some people. So you need, I have no problems explaining what it means to me, how I came to the conclusion, all that other kind of stuff. So it is a very personal journey. So do understand that. And another point I want to make, what I found really cool, is how we actually didn't cover many actual symbols in this podcast episode, but we covered the connection that we all seem to have, that one meaning we like, and we're just seeing the different representations of them from different places around the world. That's fucking cool. All right, that I found actually really, really cool. How it was like this, and then because we spoke everything that I like the things that are tattooed on me. I like the tree and all that stuff, and all that stuff's being covered. And honestly, to be 100% honest here, I was just sitting here panicking, like, I'm not going to be able to talk about anything for what my favorite symbols are because we've covered it all already, But I just wanted to add the part in being a responsible adult and not telling people to go get things permanently put on their body that they don't really know anything about. I was a bit more reckless. I mean, I have a giant dragon tattooed on me. That was my first tattoo. He's across, he goes shoulder blade to shoulder blade and down to my lower back. I was like, go big or go home. So that just gives you, an idea. But I don't get tattoos for the sake of having them. They all mean something to me. Dragons, ever since I could remember my first thoughts, I was obsessed with. So I drew one and put it on my back. And he is my power. He is my support. He is my stronghold. I have my husband and my kids on a Halloween tree because I'm born on Halloween on my leg. And their names are in little lanterns hanging from the trees. Like everything has a meaning behind it. Now I'm seeing, oh, look, tree and all my shamanic things, all the tree, all the different connections. So, but yeah, I think that's it. I wanted to make sure I got that out there so people weren't being reckless. Don't listen to me. I'm not a responsible adult.
Yeah, I was not bad that we got off topic with the symbols.
No, it went really well. I really like this.
I was going to say, we're on the topic of the way, don't get tattoos at random and such like that, while also keeping in mind symbolism and such. Yes, unfortunately, sometimes people see runic tattoos and they do get the wrong idea. I think it is those symbols that we need to bring back and help educate people that those symbols have no harm in them. They mean no harm. They are simply symbols. It's the person that gets these symbols at times that could be astray, we'll say, and it's up to us and this podcast, as well as a lot of the people that I see coming around these days, that is sort of reclaiming those old ways, those old symbols, and shining the light at. They don't necessarily mean what some people believe they mean.
I'll just say this right now. This will make everybody stop getting tattoos. Vikings didn't get tattoos, actually. The Rus did. I mean, the Slavs did, but the Vikings,
There's no evidence.
it's almost proven that they didn't have tattoos, I believe.
But what about Uzi? I mean, he's Italian, but he had tattoos.
But he was an artist, so they just did that kind of stuff, I guess. Italians are all artists. Okay, but actually, I do want to ask this one question very quickly. If you have to go, we can stop it here. But one philosophy or one thing I was reading about with this geometric stuff or whatever, and I really wanted to hear y'all's opinion on it. But there's so much debate around the Vegbasir and the Algashalmer and all that. Are those early Nordic mandalas?
No.
3-second
answers? Absolutely not, but they are pretty cool.
Okay.
I can see, I've never heard somebody refer to them as mandalas before, and that concept of that, because you see mandalas in many different places all around the world in reference of different things. So you see it as the artsy, pretty thing and stuff. The Pacos, they use mandalas as in reflection. You use pieces from nature and stuff. So I've never heard somebody refer to it as a mandala specifically. So I'm curious how that came about, even though I do have to go, but I'm curious very shortly. But I'm curious how that came. But whether, it's an actual, it was like a Nordic symbol and stuff, I don't know. There's no.
I just lost all credibility with that question, but it's just,
No,
I've been trying to. Yeah. Because I was like, maybe it was a non-influenced mandala, right? Like maybe they didn't see what other works were, but this was like an early, when we talk about the linked concept in all the minds of all the cultures, it's like, was this that expression? With especially with the Algashalmer specifically.
It's medieval magic is what it is. That's what it is when it comes down to stuff with it. It seems to have been, and I'm not saying it's directly from this, I'm saying that this caused the resurgence of the idea of magic in medieval time periods and that kind of stuff. It seems to have been traced to John Dee and Enochian magic and that kind of thing with it that made it so that way that spread throughout other parts and then wanting to have their own version of it. That seems to be the general idea, not just for what happened in Iceland with that kind of stuff with it, but for everywhere else too.
Like a Seal of Solomon type of thing?
It's its own. John Dee, which was a spy master for the Queen Elizabeth.
Original 007 for the
original 007, all that kind of stuff with it. He was an alchemist and the other things that were going on. He claimed that he had gotten into contact with these beings from the other side and whatnot, using an ancient formulaic form of magic that he called Enochian magic, which came from the book of Enoch in terms of where he supposedly derived some of the stuff from, as well as other things that he had deep dived and that kind of thing with it. And he went off and did all these different things with that. And then because of his power and influence and how powerful England was during this time period and all that other stuff, it made it so that way, that with the resurgence of Rosicrucianism that had to do with certain things with alchemy there too, a lot of Europe wanted to have its own version of magical staves of some sort, and that seems to be a reflex that happened inside of the Nordic tradition with what you're talking about. there too. It doesn't mean that people can't tap into older understandings of things while they're trying to rediscover things, and make it so that way that certain ideas and concepts are brought back. It can be that there is a Mandala like effect that comes from these things with it, but that doesn't seem to be its origins, so to speak. It might be a unintended consequence of something else.
I see. I see. Yes, John Dee, the original ponderer of the orb. Perfect. Well, do we want to close it off there? We got some good time on this one.
Yes, I have to go to bed.
Glenn.
All right. Well, with that in mind, everybody, thank you for tuning in. And if you've liked this episode or got something from it, please subscribe on YouTube. We'll give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends or anybody else you think might be interested in it. And thank you very much.
Bye.
Tell us what's your favorite symbol.
Yeah, share your
Well-
favorite symbol. We're opening up the chaos. That'll be the comments in YouTube. Share your favorite symbol.
Bye. Thanks for listening.